Welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast, where we experience life being the real you. I'm your host, Randy Adkins Jr. I'm your author, teacher, speaker, preacher, lifelong learner, and I am excited to talk about some great things about us doing Produce on Purpose with this guest that we have here today. Rhonda Parker-Taylor is an American writer, entrepreneur, and an American academic researcher from Noblesville, Indiana. Rhonda made her literary debut with the release of her novel Crossroads in February of 2023. It's a crime thriller that has garnered praise from best-selling authors J.J. Herbert and Golden Globe-nominated actress Mariel Hemingway. Her academic research focuses on emotional intelligence and its application in leadership, which she has presented at notable venues, including the United Nations Global Impact Committee. With over a decade of experience in teaching and training, Rhonda has worked at institutions such as the University of Indianapolis and National College. She is also the founder of Intelligence Solutions, a consultancy offering training, development, and business writing services. Through her diverse pursuits, Rhonda continues to inspire others while embracing life's adventures with enthusiasm and creativity. Rhonda, welcome to the Produce on Purpose podcast. How are you today?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. What a wonderful introduction you wrote. And, I'm fine. I'm standing strong. I'm keeping moving forward. And you know what? I can't wait to talk about Produce on Purpose. Can you imagine if we rise higher, reach further, and push through to the victory until everything that we wanted to accomplish happens? Just close your eyes out there, listeners, because that's what you're going to learn today. Think about it. If you wake up tomorrow and everything's exactly the way you wanted it, that's what we're going to talk about, how to get you there. How can you be the real you?
Well, Rhonda, that is going to be definitely an exciting topic because I love to talk about that, and I could talk about that all day long. So if you would, help us just get to know a little bit about you and your personal journey and how you ended up in this place, and then we'll have more conversations.
Oh, I would love to. First of all, I'm a Midwesterner, so the root of my core is your identity is your work and your purpose. However, I've learned in life that there's more than just the work and home balance. You have to have an authentic relationship, not only with others, but with yourself. And how I did that is through the journey of uncle. You know,
Oh,
the old game when you were younger, you put your hands in each other's hands and you lock, and then you try to turn the other one into submission by saying uncle, and then whoever said uncle first because it hurt,
yes.
they're the ones that won. Well, my life journey at first was all about fighting who I was
Mm.
and accepting the negative narrative that I picked out throughout our culture, throughout our lives, throughout our family systems, whatever, instead of picking the positive things that people fed me, because it wasn't an abusive situation. It's what I heard. It's what I accepted about myself. So I started in school with challenges, ended my high school years getting victory over those challenges with the help of a mentor, where I had to pass an English proficiency test or I didn't graduate, and she had to sit down and tutor me for it. And here I am now, a best-selling author. So how's that victory for you? And then turned around and went to college, got my bachelor's, my master's, my doctorate, and here we are today talking to one of the best podcasters in the nation, and talking about how our we can produce our own purpose. But how do we do that? Do you know how we do that?
Well, there are many ways that we can definitely do that, and being able to connect with ourselves, as you started to share, is making sure that we don't have those negative narratives or those things that continue to probably make don't serve us anymore. That is where we can start that journey. And I would love to hear more about how you started that journey of understanding, number one, that there were these negative narratives, and maybe give us some tips of how you started to overcome those during your journey of what was being said to yourself, and how do you start to try to overcome some of those negative uh, narratives.
I think we all have them when you think about it. But for me, for instance, I wasn't the brightest one bulb in the bunch. I was just an average student, average intelligence. And when you're younger and then when you get into the college years, everybody thrives on the IQ. And you're born with your IQ. That's who you're going to be for the rest of your life. You can't change your IQ. But
Mm-hmm.
what really changed my narrative was and made me realize, hey, I could be just as successful as somebody else, was reading a couple of books that were from Daniel Goleman on emotional intelligence. So your IQ is your left brain, your math, your logic, your reasoning skills. Your EQ are your soft skills, your interpersonal, your intrapersonal, your general mood, your openness to experience, and that's your stress management. And when I read through Daniel Goleman's book that you could build those points and that EQ was more important than IQ, I realized, hey, wait a minute. That's a true discovery for me because that doesn't mean I have to accept that I'm not going to be a leader. I don't have to accept the narrative that, hey, wait a minute, I wasn't born with this major intelligence to make me an astronaut. Instead, I was born with the innate ability to have empathy, to see other people's emotions, to put myself in their shoes. And what that did for me is it allowed me to stay a course that meant that success awaited me as I improved my skills.
Wow, that's a really good point. That a lot of times I've definitely heard of, IQ, and many times we they use that scale to talk about genius and how people are able to relate different things and concepts. However, emotional intelligence, and I often tell people this because I'm in leadership positions throughout, and a lot of the different things that I do, that what I have found in the working world and corporate world is that those who make it the best and start to understand and have success are those that have the emotional intelligence of understanding what to do, when to do them, how to make the connections. And so I want to go a little deeper into emotional intelligence, as you have brought up. And I know it sounds like this has been some of the research that you've done. That how do we begin to move into a direction of building that skill set of emotional intelligence? Because a lot of times the focus seems to be IQ only. But we're talking about is that if we can build the skill sets, no matter who we are, no matter how we grew up, or some of those other areas of our lives, we can build that skill set of emotional intelligence. What are some of the first steps to do that?
First is self reflection. Your intrapersonal skills requires you to know your own thoughts, your own values, your own biases. We all have them. And when you know those, you know when you walk into the room and you need to have interpersonal skills with others, if you already have reflected on how your upbringing changes the narrative for you compared to maybe someone from New York or someone from North Carolina or someone from California. Someone, many of us work, in different countries with different people. And when you know what your bias is and you know what your thought process is, then you can stop. You can stop yourself. It doesn't mean you change that I'm a Midwestern girl. It doesn't mean you change that you're from the South or that you're from the North or the East or from in Malaysia or wherever you're from. You can't change that part of you because you buy into some of those narratives, right? You agree with some of them because they're the way you were brought up. But what you can change is how you handle the emotions that are in between the groups. And so emotional intelligence requires first reflection, self-awareness, and then you take it into the group setting where you're able to look in the room and see when there's tension and you're aware of the tension. You can listen to hear other points of view and you can put yourself in other people's shoes. Let's say you're working on a project, for instance, that requires the automation of something. And that's a big thing now. It's getting more and more automated every day. If you're not getting the accountant's point of view, so it's not only just cultural. If you're not getting the accountant's point of view, you're not getting the finances point of view, you're not getting the operations point of view, you're not getting the sales point of view, what you end up with is a group that does not have a full thought of the problem you're trying to solve. So you have to be open to experience, which means listening, maybe brainstorming, looking at what the problems that may occur because of what our own opinions are and our own emotions. People get tension, strife, conflict when there's fear involved. Fear of something, fear of change, fear of losing power, fear of whatever it might be, right? So if you can get everybody on the same page through monitoring and controlling the emotion in the room, you can create a synergy to move forward that is open, that's adaptable, and has empathy all in one setting.
Yeah, and it sounds like that starting place that you talked about with us doing some self reflection and self awareness. You talked about bias, and I wanted to ask because as you were talking about bias, where do some of the biases that we have come from? And then, secondly, how do we begin to eliminate those biases so that as we are reflecting, I like to think of biases as almost like a filter that we end up having when we come into a situation, and it will affect how we receive our emotions. And my question becomes then, if we all have these biases, how do we begin to, number one, identify them, and then secondly, where do they come from, and how do we then begin to address them in making and during that reflection and awareness time?
Sure. So most of our biases are created from our experience, from our teachings, from our reading, anything that has to do with our own development or training as from the moment we open our eyes. Everything that we have seen, heard, felt, smelled, any of our senses have picked on, you can get a bias from it. Maybe a smell made you sneeze, when you were a kid, and then every time you smelled something, you sneezed. Then guess what? You're going to have a bias against that particular smell. Me, I had, this is a perfect example, peanuts. I had a bad reaction to a peanut when I was young. So they told me, you're allergic to peanuts. Guess what? I can eat peanuts. So was it something on the peanuts? Was it a bad peanut? I have no idea, but I have not found a peanut today that I can't eat of any flavor, whether it be cashews, whether it be, walnuts, whatever. I have not had now, but guess what? I still have in my mouth if I taste it. I can only do certain consistencies of a peanut
Hmm.
because my learned behavior was first, oh, I had a bad reaction. Second
Right.
was, but he told me that I had a bad reaction and I can't eat them. Now, as soon as I put a peanut in my mouth, I can't stand the texture.
Right.
So that's how we do everything. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be that technology's bad or news is bad, whatever that money's hard is hard to make. I'll never have wealth. Whatever those negative connotations that we have heard from, our uncles, our aunts, whatever it might be, it resonates within inside of our soul. Doesn't mean we believe them, though. See, and that's the thing about biases. Sometimes a person can say in their head, I don't have any biases. And they really believe it.
Right.
But guess what? When you put them in a situation where those biases are there, they may try to ignore them. They may try to walk with intentions, but, not address the elephant in the room. So we all have them when we walk in a room. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative experience. It could be positive ones too. Because all biases are transformational if you can address them and acknowledge that it's a bias. I might have a bias for preserving history, for whatever reason, or preserving flowers, or whatever we want to put in our way, or whatever that specific thought is that we want, and that specific feeling that we want to focus on that makes us mindful. But when we put our own thoughts, beliefs, and values on another person, that tension and that conflict will prevent you from producing a purpose. You can't align them.
Right.
So the first thing is to allow people to first recognize it, acknowledge it, and then align and evolve beyond those limits.
That makes a lot of sense to be able to really become self-reflective and aware. You will begin to understand those biases if you are true to yourself and believe that. I was just listening today, listening about communication, and one of the things that I picked up was sometimes we can be trying to communicate on different levels. Maybe someone is communicating on just needing help on how to do something, or you may be communicating the same thing and asking, really, I need emotional support at this moment. Or
Mm-hmm.
you could be asking, hey, I need you to just hear me out. I don't need a solution. How does that fit into emotional intelligence and communicating in what we do?
It's a perfect marriage. Perfect marriage. You're talking exactly what emotional intelligence is. What you just conveyed was different people come to you with certain set of issues, problems, concerns, but we don't really know what they want from us. If it maybe they need a day off, maybe they need an ear, maybe they're just emotional at the moment, maybe it's a problem in the workplace that needs to be solved and they want you to solve it. You don't know until you sit down and shed your own biases of what you think is coming out of that other person's mouth.
Right.
You can't place what you think they are telling you on them. Instead,
Right.
you have to listen, actively listen, and ask those questions. Do you need me to help solve this? Are you just needing an ear today? what is it that you're needing from me to make this situation um, have a legacy of good communication with us? You know, and that's where what emotional intelligence is all about. Having the ability to have empathy enough to listen and put yourself in that person's shoes, because people come to you for all kinds of reasons and you don't know, and we want to finish their sentence, we want to solve the problem, we want to create a new process, whatever it is that's in our head, just to get them out of your office and out back into whatever they're supposed to do a lot of times, right? And that's not being real. That's not really showing concern for what it is that they're trying to bring to you.
I think it's imperative, right, for us to really have a true connection with someone that's just not on the level of knowing something, but to actually understand a person, to start to go down the path of a more, EQ, dealing with those soft skills and communicating and coming to groups. So, what would you say would be one of the premier things that we should do in a group setting? So, you kind of had started getting us there. So, we become more self aware of who we are. Now we're in a group setting, and it is time for us to communicate with others. You said we should listen. What else should we be doing?
I think also as leaders, we have to get people to communicate what their strengths and their weaknesses are and what their concerns are. So, for instance, a team, some kind of contract, an agreement that allows them to say, okay, I'm a good writer, I'm a good researcher, not really good at Zoom, not do whatever it might be, or technology, and you know the strengths and you know the weaknesses without exploiting them. And then when you can do that, you can transform your team to actually helping each other in the training and development part of it, as you can put them in a situation where the strengths and the weaknesses help each other. But what you have to do before you can pull it all together is you have to fuel the dream with a vision. What
Mm.
is the vision? The one thing I love about going to book signings and doing my book signings, doesn't matter if they like my book. To me, everybody that walks into Barnes and Noble or the Whispering Shelf or wherever I'm there to sign books has a mission. And that mission is to find their next best read, puzzle, whatever it might be, that helps them escape their daily routine and takes them into another world. And nobody cares if I like suspense and you like fantasy, or whether this person likes history and this person likes non-reality. So it nobody cares about that. They come in with a purpose, and they all want coffee, some kind of chocolate, something that makes them feel warm and cozy, and they touch all the things that have some kind of furry pillow or something that's there for the kids, but all the adults love them too. And they have a mission, and that mission is all the same for all of them. And some of it's because they love it, and others that maybe it's a demand by their school, or that they have to get a certain book, or they need a certain skill. But it's still a mission. And when you can pull it all into one place and align it, then that synergy is going to explode and fuel the dreams of the mission and the vision.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you're talking about we become self aware, we start listening, understanding what are the dreams of those that are connecting in a room. And you talked about your book signing, and of course, being an author as well, I understand some of the process that it takes to do that. So let's talk a little bit about your book Crossroads, and I know it's a fiction a book,
Mm-hmm.
but did you actually infuse any of the emotional intelligence pieces into your book, and how did that go?
Oh, it was, this is a book of passion. It's called Crossroads. It's got the railroad tracks where the dead bodies been found. These are actual sites. The sites are real, but the crime is fiction. But what I wanted to do is pull everybody in the room, just like we're talking about. They all have a mission, and that's to get out of it. And then it's to fulfill their legal duty, whether it's the defense, the prosecution, the jury, the plaintiff, the defendant, the judge, they all have the same mission.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that they have to get along for these few days that they're get there because that's their civil duty, and they're going to come to a conclusion at the end. And so you pull everybody together in a room and all kinds of things can happen. And in Crossroads, I use the scenario of life balance. Every one of them has a life balance issue. And that's why it is endorsed by Meryl Hemingway, because she's all about life balance and mental health. So
Mm-hmm.
you have the workaholic. You have the mom that's dedicated only to her kids, that's in jury duty and glad to get away from the house. You have the prosecutor that's you know, um, there because they believes in government and state and defending democracy. And then you have the defense attorney that's there because he believes that everybody has a right. And then you have the judge there that's supposed to pull it all together. And then you have the defendant there who wants his life back. And you've got the victim's family that wants justice. And then what you find out is there is no justice. It doesn't matter who wins, who loses. Everybody has some kind of reflection in this process.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing that and making everybody imbalanced in some way, it also allows for you to see that you simply, when you're not paying attention to something in your life, something else is going to happen. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the whole premise. It explores anger, fury, and envy as the emotions that can cause chaos in this situation. It's like an Agatha Christie clue, where you're trying to figure out what's really happening when all these things start going amok. You've got people getting sick, people dying, and then IPD has to figure out why, because this was supposed to just be a regular trial that was done in a couple of days and everybody moved on. Instead, they're stuck in this pattern, and it's because they have no emotional intelligence and no life balance.
Wow, I like that, and I like the idea that it sounds like there are people we probably, whether it's ourselves or
Mm.
others that we meet, could be in similar situations. We understand the workaholic. We understand, as at some point, some of us may have played those roles in our lives or playing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And life balance is a good place for us to finally get. It's, I think, very difficult depending on our situations and our circumstances in this world. And I'm very interested to understand from you, based on, of course, the book, you had characters there, and then from your research on emotional intelligence, as we move forward, that how is what's the difference between the external factors of our lives and what we are able to truly control from the inside out? And the reason I ask that, because a lot of the imbalance comes from a lot of the external situations that we have, and really to have the right emotional intelligence on how to respond typically comes from the inside. What have you noticed based on from your research and also even from the book? How do you get from those conflicts to a place of maybe you can have some type of solution or some type of place where you find some peace?
Well, the first thing is I'm the poster for the whole scenario. Life hits. It does hit. You can't stop it from hitting. But you know what? When you prepare yourself and you put a plan together when life isn't hitting, and just do the 1 to 2 degree changes. Like after Crossroads, I would suggest anybody that understands that even chocolate has an expiration date, right? That's what Merrill Hemingway says, because you hit a crossroads and then you look at the date and you're like, oh crap, I have a problem here, right? Then go to the life balance workbook that I have coming out after Christmas, because it goes through the 13 dimensions of your life, and it helps you create, incremental changes for the next 1, 3, 5 years of your life. And when I say 13 dimensions, I'm talking about your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual, your integrity, your social connections. All of these connections are important. Now, sometimes you have to focus, like you said, life hits and things change, and you have to focus on one more than another for a second. A perfect example is I always thought I was always going to be physically, active, and this was going to happen, and this was going to happen. One day I went to first my husband called me out on it. He says, "You've been sitting too long. You're going to turn into a chair." And I laughed it off, and I thought, no, I don't have anything to worry about. But then I ended up at the chiropractor. And he said, you have peripheral syndrome. And I'm like, well, what's that? I've never even heard of it. I've had a bad back all my life. And I look it up, and it's glutes wasting away. Now, in common language, butt wasting away. Now, what the heck? Nobody wants that, right? But it's very painful. So I'm having to buy a Varidesk and stand up and do different things than I had in my original plan, because I didn't listen. That's in a business. That's in anything. If you're not listening and you're not heeding the warnings in some area of your life, things are going to fall apart. And so you go through, and every 3 to 5 years, self-reflect. And then when life hits, health, a death in the family, whatever it may be, you already have the reserves there. And a thing in place.
And that sounds like really we should be focused on. I'm a great proponent of us practicing and creating levels of discipline in our lives. And sometimes people shun away from that word, but it's just a pattern of life that you're going to do particular things because you have set, like you talked about earlier, visions and dreams, and then you talk about plans, because when we have put all of those things in place, then every day you should get to a space where you are practicing and disciplining. I always think about the athletes. Athletes, if you're going to be a top-notch athlete, the best athletes in the world, they practice. And I truly believe that if we want the great skill sets of emotional intelligence, we want to communicate really well, we want to lead and do those things in our lives, that we have to do the practice, like you just said, and we have to be disciplined on a consistent basis to look at all areas and all facets of our lives. As you have gone through taking a look at all of these areas, what would you say, based on the challenges, what's one of the number one ways to begin to overcome the challenge of probably what you're talking about, of some type of ignoring an area or some type of procrastination?
Name it and claim it. We procrastinate. We say we're not going to, oh, there's not a problem. And a lot of that's our ego just getting in the way. No, but, my sister, when it came to putting Crossroads out, I had written 5 novels and it was sitting on my desk. And she's like, why aren't you doing anything with those books? And I think she called them those things, it kind of, it's like, well, because I have this. And a lot of it has to do with intentionality, putting yourself first, putting the steps in place, coming up with all kinds of excuses. Why you can't be on a podcast? Why can't you be a guest? Why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? And why can't you drink water? Well, it doesn't have a flavor. Well, that's the intention. It's not supposed to. So it's but it nourishes your body. Why can't you eat blueberries? Well, because they're expensive. But guess what? It's more expensive to go to a doctor. We come up with every excuse in the world not to be productive, not to produce our purpose. And for us to be a victor, we have to celebrate those small successes. You talked about the athlete. Athletes get up at 5 in the morning and they're going and they're, for their first practice. Then they go do their day and then they have their evening practice. This is what it requires. It requires you to look at luck differently because everybody says you're the luckiest person in the world. But guess what? No, that's opportunity and preparation, meeting. And then when you sitting down, maybe having a cocktail someplace or having dinner or you've gone to a Christmas party and someone says, "Hey, I have a job opening up and I think you'd just be right for it." Guess what? You don't have to wait a week for you to put your resume together. You should be updating it regularly. You should be ready to go and be able to hand it to them within either an hour or the next morning, emailing it to them and be prepared to take that glory and that victory. Because if you don't, somebody else is going to have that legacy. Somebody else is going to move faster. Somebody else is going to look more prepared. And all of that comes together to being captivating to who you are, to be your best version of yourself. And it's not only about work. We have these narratives that everything's about work. I'll never be wealthy or have wealth because it's not meant for me. No, it's not that it's not meant for you. You have to put the things in practice. You have to put savings 10% back for yourself. You have to do all the steps that the experts say that you need to do. Stop ordering DoorDash. Sorry, DoorDash. But I love DoorDash. I love it to come straight to my house. I don't have to cook, but I like to cook too. So, take those steps to make the cuts that you need to be the best version of yourself.
Thank you for sharing that. That is a wonderful piece of advice for us to move forward. We have, of course, I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh, it's never enough time.
It never is.
If if you would have anything that you want to leave with our audience, I would say give it to us at this moment so that whatever takeaways they can utilize and start to implement in their lives right now based on your experiences from Crossroads to emotional intelligence to life balance to being an entrepreneur and all that you do. What are one or two things that you would leave with our audience?
Sure. First of all, if you're one of those people that have been knocked down, pushed down, stand back up. Dust yourself off. It's not worth you staying on the ground. You are worth more than that. Remember, if it's meant to be, it's up to me or you, right? You have to do it yourself. You have to dust yourself off. If you're not in that situation, but it could happen one day, and you're just trying to muddle through and produce your purpose, make sure that every day's great. Make sure every day's great. Do your best every single day. And if you want to get in touch with me and learn more about some of the things that I'm working on and some of the projects or the books that I'm writing, go to rhondaparkertaylor.com. All my social media is on there. Everything's rhondaparkertaylor.com. Follow us. Make sure you follow Produce the Purpose because Randy's bringing you the great tips there and from different experts all around the world. And just make sure that you make every day great.
Well, Rhonda, thank you. And I encourage everyone, please go look her up. That was rhondaparkertaylor.com. And this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom and information about emotional intelligence, about work-life balance, giving us a peek into your Crossroads book. I encourage everyone go out, check it out, and see those different characters and how really work-life balance works, because I'm pretty sure some of those characters you may be able to align with or know someone that is a part of that, and be able to understand that in this life, we should be able to up our skills when it comes to our emotional intelligence, up our skills on how we interact with others and how we communicate. And so we will do that in a greater way with intentionality. And as we talked about earlier, that we should practice, we should have discipline, we should be walking with intention. And most of all, we all should be producing on purpose.